Hello and welcome to The Hearing, our music review show here on the channel. I'm John.
I'm Scotto.
And without any further ado, on to this week's album, which is from 1997, In Loving Memory of by Big Wreck. Big Wreck is a Canadian-American rock band formed in Boston, Massachusetts in 1994, while the original members were all students at the Berklee College of Music, which explains a lot. After a few years of gigging around the Boston area, the band signed to Atlantic Records and released their debut album, In Loving Memory of. They disbanded in 2002, a year after releasing their second album, The Pleasure and the Greed, and vocalist and guitarist Ian Thornley pursued a solo career with his band Thornley. In 2010, Thornley and guitarist Brian Doherty reunited for a cross-Canada tour, playing both Big Wreck and Thornley songs. In 2012, under the name Big Wreck, they released their third studio album, Albatross, and the band has since released the albums Ghost in 2014 and Grace Street in 2017. In Loving Memory of is, as I mentioned, the band's debut studio album. The album features layered progressive elements in addition to its heavy southern rock style, and lyrically, it deals predominantly with relationship issues. Frontman Ian Thornley noted the majority of the album is actually written about one girl, someone who's still fucking me up.
That,
unquote.
Yeah. That's a lot of albums, man.
In Loving Memory of was released on October 7th, 1997, produced by Matt DiMatteo, Big Wreck, and Chris Wordman, and features Ian Thornley on vocals, lead guitar, mando guitar, keyboards, and drums on By the Way. Brian Doherty on guitar, David Henning, I knew I was going to make that mistake, on bass, and Forrest Williams on drums. Mando guitar, I looked it up. It's a 12-string mandolin, all unison, tuned like a guitar. All the strings are it's like a 12-string guitar, but all in the shape of a mandolin. All the strings are unison instead of some of them.
That explains some of the sounds we're hearing. I mean, because it sounded kind of like a
mandolin-ish thing.
But it was a fuller sound to it. Apparently,
Ian Thornley is the one Zeppelin-influenced guitar player who couldn't be arsed to learn mandolin. So on to the tracks. Reminder, I don't edit any songs into the episodes for copyright reasons, but down in the description and on our blog at johnandscotto.com, you'll find links to In Loving Memory of on Spotify and YouTube, so you can listen along. Starting with track 1, The Oaf, My Luck is Wasted. This was the big single.
I vaguely remember this. I think when I was listening to it, I'm kind of like, I think I've heard this. I just can't remember where from.
It's a very bluesy song. I love the Leslie guitar in the opening and in the outro.
I started singing the Smiths along to it.
Yeah, it's kind of Smith sound. It's very Johnny Marr kind of sound in the beginning, yeah.
I mean, of course, they got that from Bowie, or Fripp, you should say, on Heroes.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of influence, this song, and this album, and specifically this song, were released the very year that the White Stripes formed.
Neat. And I was going to say, you could even take that guitar sound back even further to Pete Townsend, of course.
I don't know if Jack White was influenced by Big Wreck. I suspect Thornley and Jack White probably had similar influences going back. But it could have been an influence on him, because this song particularly is very White Stripes sounding.
I don't know. Well, yeah, I guess you could see like some of his later stuff, like some of his Dead Weather stuff.
It's also one of the few songs where you can actually hear the bass.
I was thinking of that. Like, I know you're always.
I'm a bass player, so I'm going to play that bass.
And so, a lot of the album, I'm kind of like, I'm not getting it.
In the video for this song, David Henning is playing a 12-string bass, which, for those who don't know, it's the regular bass with 2 unison strings an octave up. Tom Peterson from Cheap Trick plays one.
Okay.
It's kind of like an 8 string which Jeff Ament from Pearl Jam plays, but it's got an extra string an octave up. And it can kind of get lost in the sound a bit with the guitars. It gets lost among guitars a lot. So I think that's why it explains it for a lot of the album. Also love the kind of metal palm muting on the second half of some of the verses. Cause it's got this kind of metal guitar mixed with this bluesy verse. Dug that. and how the louder guitar kind of fades in the chorus.
Okay, yeah, I remember hearing that.
And then they bring back the Leslie for the instrumental break, which was an interesting choice. He doesn't go for a conventional solo. He goes for this kind of composed Leslie guitar part.
Yeah.
Um, and we get these harmonies in the third verse that sound a lot like Plant. Again, Thornley is very Zeppelin influenced.
I thought well, his voice does a lot of different changes
Yeah,
throughout the
yeah.
album. And you can kind of see who he's channeling here and there.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he has a similar style. At first, I thought it was similar to Lane Staley.
Okay.
But I think he's taking like a Scott Weiland approach where he's,
A little bit on the lower stuff, yeah. On the
being
last
like a
verse,
different,
yeah.
person for each song.
Yeah, yeah. On the last verse, when he goes really high, he sounds like in the harmony. It's very Plant. He's practically doing an impression. At other points, Buckley, the reason we're doing this week is Buckley was a big influence on Thornley, I think.
I really only got him in one of the later songs.
Oh, okay.
Buckley,
And not really much to say about the lyrics on this one. It's a blues song, and it's very kind of conventional in that sense.
Yeah, a lot of the lyrics on this left me flat.
The lyrics are very hit or miss for me.
Yeah.
They're really good or really kind of eh.
Yeah, there were some lines I'm just kind of like, okay.
But on to track 2, the other single of that song, and it's just called That Song.
Yeah.
Love the kind of shimmery guitar sound and the really heavy distorted bass at points. It gets really big in the verse.
Yeah,
and the
they're
chorus,
going for
I
like
should
a
say.
kind of a Pantera feel almost in this,
Yeah,
aren't they?
yeah.
They're really going for an aggressive.
But just on the chorus, the verses have this kind of repetitive melody and
Yeah.
riff, and the lyrics are relatable, but nothing really earth-shattering. Great drum sound, but overall, it's kind of repetitive. I think it's one of the weaker songs.
Right. I think that's kind of where things went wrong for them. These two, I don't know
The
how
opening
good of
tracks, okay.
singles they are, both of these two, and yet that's what they went with. But
now, getting a bit more interesting, onto track 3, Look What I Found.
I was like, is this another person? Do they have another vocalist on there?
Ian Thornley admitted that the track was intended to sound like Soundgarden.
Okay.
As a reference to how popular bands gain fame emulating other bands. And I just realized yesterday, or maybe even this morning, that that's what the lyrics are about.
Huh.
It's fully operational, and we don't even have to sell. I ripped it, but what the hell? It's someone else's soul. Oh well, is the opening. Your shtick is getting thinner, but you'll come out a winner. Check's already in the bank, but you've forgotten who to thank.
But yeah, I do have Cornell for the chorus, definitely. I thought he was going, like, I had to Google these guys because I couldn't remember who they were.
Uh-huh.
But the band is called Days of the New.
Yeah, okay. Vaguely remember one or two songs from them.
It's like, yeah, I remember one song that they just hit us over the head with and played over and over again. I'm like, the one to abuse, that song.
Right, yeah. I didn't get a lot of Soundgarden in this one. I mean, it opens with this great slide guitar part. I don't remember Tim Thale ever playing slide.
No, I don't think so
and
either.
It's still kind of bluesy. They're very blues and southern rock influenced.
It's definitely their strong suit.
Yeah.
They're at their best when they are doing southern rock, which kind of comes in a little later.
I still love the riff. The vocals are very Cornell, as you mentioned.
Yes,
but
I
that's
think
really
he channels Cornell a few times in this.
Yeah, that's really the only Soundgarden I personally get. I love how soft the vocal is. It's almost kind of subliminal. One of my favorite songs, obviously, if you couldn't tell. I hear the Mando guitar coming in again in the second verse. And the solo just gets chaotic. It's this crybaby solo, whammy pedal, wah-wah pedal rather. Crybaby solo with the band just playing this one riff, very Zappa in that sense, and Thornley just making noise. And it goes out on slide. Again, he's a great slide player. On to track 4, Blown Wide Open, my favorite on the album. The first
I thought
ballad.
a ballad was kind of welcome here.
I deeply relate to the lyrics.
Oh yeah.
So I'm all surrounded by the things I thought I put away, is the first line. and how the mess is joining forces. He talks about a piles in different places. The mess is joined forces at night. I hear them say, "Come out with your hands up, so we can blow you away." Very much relate to it. Again, you can hear the bass. There's really nice melody in the intro, and then it kind of replies to the vocal
Yeah.
in the verses, which is very nice. Misa from Bandmate does that occasionally, where she'll kind of play off the vocal instead of playing with the guitars or the drums. Really nice build to this big chorus, with a really nice gentle solo afterwards. So dynamic. This band is great with dynamics. They can soft to loud. They do brilliantly, and it's not just the Pixies loud, soft, loud thing.
Right.
It's not predictable in that sense, or Nirvana, who ripped it off from the Pixies.
I mean, I found up until the next track, a lot of this just didn't really stand out from other music of the time. I mean,
Well, this one again, it's. I love the kind of the lead guitar work, and the lyrics really hit me. I think that's really what it is for me.
Yeah.
And not crazy about the kind of high oohs and ahs during the second solo, but I love how it builds to the bridge and it ends on the bridge. Blown wide open, the gun's still smoking.
Yeah.
It just builds to this bridge, just kind of incessantly, and just ends on that, which I thought was a nice touch. Now, this next one was the standout for you. On to track 5. How Would You Know?
This, I would say, would be my pick for the strongest on the album.
That's interesting, because it's one of my weaker ones.
It's what they should be doing. They are, and it was, I had the epiphany that they're a Southern rock band trapped in 90s alternative hell.
Interesting.
They needed, something like this to just, I mean, I really like the big fuzz guitar sound that they get into, and like the choruses and the, I mean, I really felt here they were for the first time they were being original and doing their own thing here, and I would have loved to have heard more of this.
It was just a little too Southern rock for my taste. Nice riff. Love the distorted bass.
Well, I mean, there's a band that we haven't mentioned that we really should mention where it comes to what they're descendants of,
Okay.
and it's of course the Tragically Hip.
Oh yeah.
Because I mean, Canadian, as far as Canadian rock goes,
and Thornley is the Canadian one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really only familiar with Fully Completely, but
and of course, you could say all rock in Canada is Southern rock because everyone lives on the southern border.
Fair point. Did the Tragically Hip predate them by far?
Oh yeah, because remember we were playing them back in our day.
True. Yeah, at OCC in the early '90s. Yeah,
I mean they're I guess they're like Canadian Led Zeppelin and Beatles rolled into one, aren't they?
Yeah, and I do hear, now that you mentioned, I do hear the influence, even though I'm just familiar with the One T Hip album. On to track 6. Oh My, this is another favorite of mine.
We're back to the 90s.
Yeah, maybe because that's just is part of my era. I love that sound, and I think they do it well.
I think the problem is this is a very dark time for music in the late 90s.
And I kind of revel in that.
It was just, oh man, it all could have been so great, but this is what we've got now instead.
I kind of revel in the emo-ness of it, particularly this song. Love the interplay between the drums and the kind of slippery bass, a lot of slides and muted notes. And I like the lyric. You say I'm obsessive, I don't want to hear, overly possessive, who, when, and where. If nothing important is what I mean to you, I'll drown all the rodents and chase after you. It's very self-pitying, but I kind of revel in that sort of thing. I love it. Love the dissonant riff leading into the main verse as well. It just really fits the mood. And it doesn't waste time. It's 2 verses, 2 choruses, and it's one of the shorter songs. On to track 7, Under the Lighthouse. This one was written by the drummer, Forrest Williams. Ian Thornley wrote most of the songs. He co-wrote a few of the others with the bassist and drummer, but this one was written entirely by the drummer, which is unusual. You don't get drummers writing songs a lot.
And there's only one singer here. There's not
Yeah,
more than
no,
one.
Ian Thornley sings everything.
Because it's like during the verse, he's back to Days of the New, Bryan Adams, and on the chorus, he's like Simon Le Bon or something like that.
I don't hear Simon Levon. I do
Like
hear a lot of the '90s stuff you're talking
like
about. Yeah,
he's singing like in a higher,
we just go up for the chorus. I love the lyric, particularly the line, "Keep my name under the whiteout and just let me miss you all the while." I know you would have left me anyway, so I'll just bow my head. I swear you would have left me anyway, so I'll leave you instead.
I have not seen you cling to lyrics like this.
This is one of my Desert Island discs. I should point
uh,
out. I've loved this album since it was released, so I know it very well. Which is why I'm quoting the lyrics like I am, because I normally can't do that, especially if it's something I just heard. The lyrics aren't going to hit me. Something I've listened to, and incessantly, I'm going to know. Love the kind of syncopated guitar on the left in verse 2, and just the layered guitars. They do. Thornley was brilliant, and Brian Doherty, brilliant at layering multiple guitars. Because there's only 2
yes.
guitar players in the band, but I don't think there's a track that doesn't have at least 5 or 6 guitar tracks on it. And another one that goes out on the bridge. They apparently tended to do that with their ballads. And from one extreme to the other, track 8, Fall Through the Cracks.
I like the change of pace and the guitar. Speaking of the guitar work, holy fuck!
And it opens kind of with this industrial groove.
Yeah,
with this, I don't know if it's real drums or a machine with this kind of electronic sound. Love the groove that creates. Can't say I relate to this one. It's a guy basically saying, well, Thornley to this girl you talked about, saying, I'll give up my identity to be with you. My opinions don't mean that much to me, so if they're clashing, I'll trash them happily.
It's the whole, what you're willing to sacrifice to try to keep the relationship alive.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm too strong-willed. I don't relate to that. But I love that it's kind of an industrial.
Things happen.
Yeah, kind of an industrial sound with this really heavy distorted guitar. I love how the opening riff kind of goes off time now and then. They kind of keep the timing interesting, which is proof that they went to Berkeley.
Yeah.
Berkeley, for those who don't know, Berkeley with 2 E's at the end. A music school in Boston, of course. On par with Juilliard, one of the best in the country.
I thought that's where we ran our movie theater, but I guess it's a different Berkeley.
No, that's a different Berkeley. Also not Berkeley University in California. But one of the best music schools in the country. These guys are brilliant musicians, which is an interesting thing to mix with Southern rock.
I do like the guitar solo on this one, though.
Yeah, it's kind of it's 2 different solos, one on each side.
Yeah, it's very Hendrix or Corgan, depending on where you want to go with there.
On to track 9, Waste. Again, great palm muting at the beginning. It's got kind of a sparkly sound on the riff. The engineer or the producer did a great job with the various guitar sounds. Loved the off-kilter groove of this one, and the really noisy guitars in the background of the chorus.
Yeah, I like the chorus in this one. Not so much the lyrics, though.
The lyrics just kind of lay flat to me. Like I said, he's hit or miss lyrically for me.
Did I just hear excuses lame?
Yeah. Sure.
No, don't do that.
I love how the timing is very loose on this one. Like a lot of old blues did that. They stick in an extra bar here and there because it was more about the message than the rhythm. And he plays around with this on this song. And the distant effect on the vocals in the bridge was very interesting. Should have mentioned with going back a ways. I'll forget it. How Would You Know was another one where Buckley stuck out to me on the bridge. I just happened to think of it.
Maybe that's why I liked it.
Yeah.
For the record, I've listened to Buckley.
I've noticed
for this week since it's unusual that I stick with an album like this after we review it, but in this case I definitely have.
Yeah, Spotify has this thing on the desktop app, shows you what your friend's last lesson was, and I've been noticing a lot of Buckley from you. That's good. didn't really stick for me. He's incredibly talented, but it just didn't. It
Everything
was.
except the standards.
Well, yeah, yeah, of course.
I've skipped all the standards and just went with the rock songs and the crazy prog songs.
Back to In Loving Memory of, track 10, by the way. Love the kind of swirly sound effects before the riff comes in.
This is probably the most Buckley-like song on the whole album, and
Yeah,
one
yeah.
of the stronger tracks I think on the album too.
Really nice melody. It's another ballad. Kind of sounds like a drum machine, even though there's no talk of programming. So I'm wondering if Forrest Williams was just that precise, or if
Who
he could
knows?
program it.
That's a possibility.
I mean, Berkeley, so it very well could
Yeah,
have
well,
been
right.
Williams. And I love the space that he puts between the vocal melody, the vocal phrases. He'll sing a line and wait a while, and sing the next line. It just gives it some nice air, some nice breath. And I loved the feedback right during the pre-chorus and the chorus. It's just this feedback that comes at you from the side that's used very musically, which is not something that feedback is done with feedback a lot. I love how the riff comes back louder after the first chorus, and so the feedback again just kind of develops. And there's no real drums, or at least until 2/3 of the way in. It's just a straight ballad with just a lot of guitars and a vocal.
Yeah. Oh yeah, right. Well, it's just kind of your classic, Led Zeppelin.
Yeah. It is very Zeppelin. And again, great use of the feedback in this one. Just amazes me because they use it very musically.
Although Buckley was doing that too, because Buckley was a big Led Zeppelin disciple.
Yeah, true. Yeah, we talked about that. How he could borrow from Zeppelin without stealing.
Yeah.
Now on to track 11, probably the heaviest song on the album, Between You and I. This is the one that screams Soundgarden to me.
I was like, this is probably those Days of the New song on the album.
See, I only know a couple of Days of the New songs, and they're both acoustic.
I think I only know like the one song.
And they're all acoustic. This is songs I know are acoustic, so I don't really connect Days of the New.
I mean, I think they elevate what Days of the New did, because I think Days of the New were a very flat, two-dimensional band that really were just ripping off Alice the whole way through. Where I think what these guys did is they fleshed it out. They gave it more life, but it's still just a product of its time.
Yes. It is the album is very 90s. Loved how it quiets down for the verses. Comes in with this giant, very kind of Soundgarden riff that plays with the timing a bit. Gets very quiet, really nice arpeggio behind the vocal. Again, he goes very plant with the higher vocals. And I love how the verses kind of deviate a little bit. The second verse, the melody and kind of the timing is a little different from the first one. He doesn't really just repeat it. The verses on this one, again, very Buckley. Anytime he goes mellow, he gets Buckleyed. He sounds like Buckley to me. I love the line, I still recall the effort to forget. And I love how it goes out on this kind of as of yet unheard, very dissonant riff. It just goes out in this new instrumental section that you hadn't heard before. On to track 12, Prayer. Another one of the weaker ones for me. It's nice, it's just repetitive.
Yeah, there's like a weird 80s pop progression to it, but I mean, that's the only thing that really makes it stand out.
I like the kind of ragged, out-of-tune guitar. It kind of fits the sad, meaning. I get the impression it's about the death of a friend. And I like how it does build nicely into this nice tight groove.
Or it's the end of the relationship, or
Oh yeah, true. I
haven't really had time to analyze lyrics on this.
Yeah. I
kind of stayed away listening to some of them just from what I heard. I was kind of like, I don't think I want to look too much closely.
Some of them are great. Some of them
sometimes you're better off not.
I think the farewell old friend and prayer just put me in the mind of a death. But probably the end of the relationship. This is a song I think I would like more if I were drunk. I'm gonna have to try that next time.
For science.
On to track 13, overemphasizing. This was the last track on the original release.
Now, this is, I mean, very Led Zeppelin, dazed and confused. Meets
I don't get dazed and confused.
It, that slow, kind of Death Waltz or whatever. You kind of get Pink Floyd's In the Flesh or
A little bit, yeah. It's just
uh,
this nice kind of mellow, off-kilter groove that's very dramatic. Nice arpeggio,
Alice's Love Hate Love. That I mean, I think, although I think they took it from Floyd.
probably. Um, and I love that the progression is led more by the bass than by the guitars. The bass is kind of what pulls it along.
Yeah,
And again, the more great distorted bass on the chorus. Um, and I love the intro that leads into verse two. It just plays around with the arpeggios a bit, a little bit works a little lead in there. Thornley wasn't a lead guitarist in the sense where he took big solos a
right.
lot, but he did some very interesting kind of mellower, sort of more complicated compositional stuff.
Yeah.
It isn't one of Thornley's better lyrics, I have to admit that.
It just, I mean, I was kind of expecting it to go to this climax, where you're kind of hit over the head, but it doesn't. It just kind of, and now we're done, kind of thing.
Yeah, it
It's
kind of
like,
goes
oh,
out on the mellower section. Speaking of solo, he does take a big solo in this one at the end. It kind of reminds me of Alex Lifeson, even though it's slide, which Alex didn't really do. There is a nice percussion break right before the solo, though. And it just ends on this big, ugly, distorted chord.
yeah.
Which I think was an interesting statement. It just
was very typical of the time, though, that whole distortion, and the one note.
Mm-hmm. And there are 2 bonus tracks on the Spotify release. It's the 20th anniversary release. The first of them, track 14, Ill Advice. Hadn't heard either of these songs until last night when I reviewed it. So it was interesting to hear 2 new songs from them.
Yeah, I listened to them once yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you could see either of them replacing something on the album?
Absolutely not. Didn't like either of them.
Yeah, they kind of. A lot of these just blended together for me.
This one
no exception.
Has this very kind of 70s California Eagles-ish guitar sound, with a lot of slide. It's a nice time to play with the timing. It's just a bit too major for my tastes. Again, I like the emo, self-pitying vibe that a lot of the album has. I revel in that shit. It reminds me a bit of Collective Soul.
Oh wow! Yeah, I can see that because
it's very tight, majory kind of
upbeat
kind of
time period,
And the ending just gets too noisy, which is weird for me to say because I like when things get chaotic typically, but it's happy chaotic, and that's no. And track 15, Still Holding. Again, hadn't heard it before last night. The riff is very 90s. I mean, most of the album, as you've been pointing out, is very 90s, but this one goes especially 90s for me.
Yeah, I think the other curse of this album is that this is the time period of the CD. So we can put as many tracks on this thing as we want. And, I think that kind of gets... I think sometimes less is more.
Well, there were there were 13 on the original. These were 2 bonus tracks that were not on the original.
True.
But the album itself is long. It's about an hour.
I think if this were like a 40-minute album, like in the old school, I think it would have a better impact, honestly.
Yeah. I just want to point out, Still Holding, again, repetitive, reminds me a bit of Collective Soul again. I needed a palate cleanser after this song, so I put on the new Bandmade. The rest of their albums are also very long. The shortest one is 49 minutes. Most of them are over an hour.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, this is a band, Thornley particularly, because I'm guessing he's the Ian Anderson, Danny Elfman of the band who just makes all the decisions.
Yeah, I feel that's kind of been a cool part of, the time we're living in now is that things are, shorter releases are now coming out and shorter songs even too, of people just doing sketches and just, in and out and done.
But Thornley really likes long albums. I guess I should say I really love this album. I'm not that familiar with anything after it. I listened to The Pleasure and the Greed a few years ago when I first heard about it because it was completely off my radar when it came out. There was something I didn't like about it. I don't know what it is now. I checked it out yesterday. It's good. It's more of the same, which is a lot of what their albums seem like, just more of the same. So I'll like them. If you don't like this one, you probably don't want to bother with anything else.
I would be open to listening to other releases of theirs.
Okay.
You know,
So
I mean, you can see the talent, here.
on to the big question: would you recommend the album?
I would not recommend this one. I think I wouldn't. I mean, there was only like 3 songs that I really were like into, and out of 13, that's not worth sitting through the other 10.
Like I said, it's one of my Desert Island discs, so of course I recommend it. A rare split. I think this has only happened like once before, or twice before.
Not many albums I have not recommended.
The only ones you haven't recommended are, well, you were undecided on Prestamico, and you didn't recommend Information Society.
Yeah.
I didn't recommend. Oh, we split on Ted Leo too.
Ted Leo, yeah.
I didn't recommend that one. And oh, you also didn't. I don't think you recommended Blows Against the Empire, the Jefferson Starship.
Oh yeah, that was.
I don't think you recommended that one. I recommended it just because it was weird. Anyway, that's it for In Loving Memory of by Big Wreck. Until next time, when we'll be reading No Code by Pearl Jam. This will be interesting because I don't really know anything after 10.
This is like, I don't know. This is kind of like them. This is, a Pearl Jam fan. This is their album.
This is their good one. Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of bands have that album that the fans really love, but the
general public
didn't love, and the kind of newbies, the people who don't really know their music, don't really know about. But the people who don't really know their music have another album that they love, but the hardcore fans are meh.
It's it's our generation though. I mean, Pearl Jam's a band that could have made the same album numerous times and would have sold so many and would have been like, at David Grohl's level and stuff.
Right.
And instead they said, "Fuck you, we're going to do this."
And I deeply respect that. I love 10. I was kind of put off, but was it Versus the second one?
Versus was kind of them making the same album again.
It was just a little too mellow for me. I love the heavier stuff on 10.
Versus, I mean, it was an album that the record company pushed them into making.
Okay.
And they were thinking, oh, we're going to be a big band, so we got to make the same album again. And there were some good parts to it, I thought.
Mm-hmm. It was a little too meh for me. And unfortunately, I didn't really look into anything after that.
It's not an album I listened to until years later, actually, Versus. It was one that I'd kind of skipped, and they brought me back with Vitology because it was just so weird.
But what I'm saying, to the album that the non-fans love, in Pearl Jam's case, it would be 10.
Yeah.
In Rush's case, because I was a big Rush fan for years, it would be Moving Pictures. Which most of the real fans are like, it's okay.
Which reminds me, of course, always check out my playlist of unoriginality on Spotify, where you can hear young black teenagers sampling Tom Sawyer.
Okay,
is that time to make the donuts?
You put that on? Okay.
Oh yes, I did.
It's not really a cover; it's a sample.
Oh, I put that in there too. It's unoriginal.
And it always slips my mind, but there's a song on there that isn't really a cover that I've been meaning to point out, but I forget what it is right now. Oh, we'll have to look and check.
There's a number. There are a number of songs that aren't actually covers, but if they sample something.
Well, no, this is a song that was just an original song by the band that you have on there for a cover for some reason. I'll have to check it and mention it later. Anyway, like I said, No Code next week. Until then, always remember, never forget, wherever you go in life, there you are.